Welcome to the All Things Real Estate Podcast with our very own Josh Barker. With more than 20 years of experience and over 5,000 properties sold, Josh brings a unique perspective to the real estate market. Let's get started.
Okay, we're back.
Hey, we're back.
We're back again. It's October.
It is.
Although the weather tells you it's July, but the calendar tells me it's October.
Oh, man. It's a great place to live.
Last few months, we've been talking about how the absorption rate, which is how quickly, if no homes came to market, how fast at the current purchase rate would inventory be gone.
Yeah.
And you've always said that if it's 3 months or less, that's considered a seller's market.
Right.
4 to 5 months is neutral. Mm-hmm. Anything more than 5 months is considered a buyer's market.
That's right.
We've been watching it creep because I remember, I don't know if it was last year, but it was like 1.2 and it slowly started to creep up. I think the last time we spoke, I think you said it was 2.75. Do you know where it sits right now?
The absorption rate's right now about 2.96.
So we're still in a seller's market.
Yeah, we call it like the tail end of a seller's market. I mean, but with the angle of that trajectory, though, I mean, by next month, I would imagine we're going to be in a neutral market.
So what does that mean for, I mean, when you talk to sellers and you talk about pricing, that's got to affect pricing, right? Because it's pricing before when the market is the inventory is so low, you're always trying to price for what's about to hit.
That's
because
right.
the market's going up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are you guys doing now? Like when
how are you changing that?
Yeah.
Well, first I would say it's a lot different between, there's a difference between what a real estate agent does for pricing strategies and what an appraiser does. Mm-hmm. So real estate agents are typically trying to project what might be happening in the future, where appraisers are typically requested to provide evidence of what's already happened in the past. And so that's where there's always these little conflicts that pop up from time to time between, what a realtor might be able to generate for an offer on a home and whether an appraiser can justify as the value. Those kind of things pop up. But to answer your question is that when you're moving into a neutral market, the advantage begins to slip to more of a neutral position. And pricing more accurately from the start instead of testing the market is typically how the more successful sellers are approaching it. So if they have the option of pricing at the high end of the range or pricing, at value, most sellers, if they want to get moved, are pricing at value right now and not risking that they overprice and perhaps even chase the market down if it declines a little bit in this season.
And you're always trying to balance that idea, like, look, we want to get you the most for your home, obviously.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, people don't want their home to sit on the market for a long period of time. It's considered like a negative, thing, right? So you have to price. It's probably a little bit easier now, I would think, than it was 5 months ago when interest rates first. 5 or 6 months ago when interest rates were first, because they jumped very quickly.
They did. Yeah, they've doubled now in the last 8 months. And
people, at that point, people were like, but my friend just sold their house 4 months ago for X. You're like, that was a 2.9% interest rate.
Yeah, and the media was a little bit behind that too. It's always tough for a real estate agent when you come out and you can, and the facts on the ground that day. You know how much the rates have moved up. You know exactly where, what's selling and what's not. But your property owner that you're going to meet with, they may not be up to speed with the same situation. They may not see the same fact pattern that you see. And so when you show up, it's like this, trying to educate them on where the market's at before you start diving into valuation and things like that, because you're trying to make sure that, hey, they understand, what's going on. And, and sometimes in competing situations where an agent's, and seller's interviewing multiple agents, maybe some of those agents are up to date on the market, maybe some of them are not. That's challenging too, because if they heard a conflicting story of the market, compared to what you were saying, naturally the seller would want to be, focused on the more optimistic person, right? I mean, that certainly sounds appealing. Of course, it doesn't necessarily translate into your home sold. So my point is that recently the media has caught up. So you see all the news reports and all the headlines. And I think unless you were hiding under a rock or something, most people know the market has now shifted. There is still some, local radio stations with some fear mongering going on with some advertisers or whatever. But the reality of it is that we've had a long period of market expansion, and it's natural that we would cycle into a little bit of a retraction period. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
And there's a bunch of factors that, because for the last few years, I have been going on a radio show talking about, hey, the Reading market's going to climb.
Yeah.
Right. And we would talk, people say, yeah, but it's going to be a bubble and it's going to come back down. It's like, And they always refer to the 2007, 2008 because that is historically the single greatest housing bubble that we, you know what I mean? Like, I'll always refer to the absolute best or the absolute worst.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but the factors that drove that, the easy loans, the people purchasing a second, third, and fourth home without renters, that's not there.
No. And, well, we really don't. What's not there now is inventory.
That's the other piece.
That's a huge difference this time around than last time. Last time, I mean, we had a massive amount of speculation going on. I mean, we've seen numbers as high as 45, 50% of all purchases in 2005 and 06, the beginning of 06, were speculation.
Which is crazy.
Crazy. And so you had massive amounts of new construction taking place, a lot of vacant properties all over the place.
Which means a super low rent.
Super low rent.
Which is not what's going on now.
No, not at all. Well, because again, inventory, right? So back then was a different fact pattern. You had negative amortization, interest-only loans, variable interest rate stuff that was floating around out there, and just primed for a market, correction. But I just pulled this up. I'm looking right now at our MLS. This is that's 2021. I had 2008. Here we go. September of 2008. Listen to this. So for those listeners that are listening to this right now, so 2005 and 6, arguably that was the peak of the market. By 7, people are like, uh-oh, we're in trouble. Yep. Something's going on. Yep. By 8, everyone is recognized the market has shifted. Prices have changed a lot. So listen to these numbers. Median sales price in 2008, $274,000. Okay. Now this is like the all-time worst market, 2008. If you guys are paying attention, that's right around the financial meltdown crisis, and everybody's, banks are closing down. I mean, things that you never thought. I mean, Hallmark, companies in the country are collapsing. There was 179 properties that closed escrow in September of 2008.
Wow.
179.
Even in
the worst of the worst, 179. This is why I try to push back with people that go super negative. I'm like, look, at the end of the day, people need a place to live. Mm-hmm. No matter what, they need to do it. And you have the option of owning a home or renting a home. Those are the only options that those people have, really, unless you're going to live with a family relative or something like that. And for you parents out there with kids in the house still wanting to move on, I get it. But that's really the option. 179. And so right now, last month, we had like 238 here in our market. We're still selling a lot of properties locally.
Yeah, it's just the prices have shifted a little bit because now the cost of money is so much higher.
Absolutely.
And, anything that goes up that high, I mean, it was about 10 years straight of just quarter after quarter after quarter. Yeah. And it got super hot during COVID. Yep. I mean, the market started going crazy, and year over year, people are seeing like 20 to 30% increase in prices at some of the lower segments. Yep. Right. The $220,000 house a year later was like $265,000.
Yes.
It's just crazy.
Well, and this is the argument I have with, my parents, right, and stuff like that about the higher interest rates, because everybody says, well, you know what? We had rates at 16% in the 70s. I'm like, I get it. I understand.
You also bought a house for $58,000.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And what we had during COVID was insanely low interest rates. Yeah. It absolutely triggered a robust buyer's market with a market that was already really slim on inventory for obvious reasons, drove the valuations high. If anything, what we're giving back right now is very similar to what the stock market's giving back. We're giving back the value that was created during COVID.
Basically,
that's what we're doing, right? Mm-hmm. And the stock market right now, for apparent reasons, it looks like it's making those adjustments too, and it'll find its new equilibrium, if you will, and it'll continue to grow, I'm sure, over time. I'm not the stock guy, but I would assume it is. I hope so. I'm still giving money to them every year, right? So I would assume that the real estate market will be the same. We're going to go through a correction there because we had really low interest rates that push prices up. We're going to have this correction that obviously we're seeing right now. We'll find a new equilibrium, and then we'll continue to grow out of that.
Maybe not for this month, but next month or the month after that, what I think would be good is for us to carry on with this conversation is to say, look at the median price, and let's look at the median price 1 year ago and 2 years ago. And what you might find is it only slips down a little bit. Yes, it came down, but it only came down a little bit. It's still much higher than it was 2 or 3 years ago. People still see appreciation in the market, and a lot of appreciation too.
Well, the median sales price right now last month was $424,000. That was the median, median list price. Median
that
sales
sounds
price.
High.
Let me rephrase that. The median sales price was $361,000. The median list price was 424.
Wow, what a difference.
Oh yeah, between the two. Yeah.
A little bit of disparity there.
Oh yeah.
That goes back to what you said about the realtors that come in and interview and well, I can get you, whatever, retail plus 20%, sure.
Yeah.
Like there you go.
Well, there's the market, right? And right now what we have is a situation where the median price of a home is higher, right, than the median qualified buyer. And that's because of interest rates going up. And it's going to take some time. I mean, because the median sales price either has to continue to come down or the median buyer somehow has to be able to qualify for more, which could be either through wage growth or through interest rates going down. But we're going to continue to see pressure until those two things are closer together. You know what I mean? Right now, there's a pretty big spread between the two, the median sales price and the median buyer that qualifies for. But as those two numbers come closer together, the frequency and the volume of home sales starts to go up more, and you start to see the market begin to find itself again. And that's really the transition that we're in right now. We're not done. We still have a transition to get through. But like I said, everybody's still faced with the same decision, rent or purchase. And right now it's not the peak anymore. So would you rather buy at a peak or closer to the bottom? And this cycle, we're moving that way, right? So.
Well, like we said, somebody else coined it, but you marry the house and you date the interest rate.
Yeah.
So you're purchasing at the lowest point and then refinancing a couple of years later when the interest rate, something's going to have to give.
Yeah.
Something will give.
And another one I like to hear too, we're all hearing these little phrases popping around, right? The other one that I really have taken a liking to is that if you rent, you are paying 100% interest.
Yep.
Because you're not gaining any equity.
None.
Right? Whereas if you own, currently right now, you're probably paying an interest rate at 7% or somewhere in that range anyway.
Is it up to 7%?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In fact, for some, it's higher.
Wow.
So right now, the interest rates are.
I was still thinking we were in the sixes.
No, man, that was so last week.
So
no, rates right now, guys, if you don't know that, the rates right now, they're bouncing somewhere between 7 and 7.5%. You can get it down in that 6.5 range, but you're going to pay some points to do it. And that's kind of what's going on right now.
There's a lesson in there because I remember when rates were 5% just a few months ago, people were like, well, I'll just wait till it comes back down. Look what happens.
Yeah,
so,
it didn't change. No. Right. And people are still faced with the earlier part of this conversation of you're either renting or you're buying, so it's a tough situation to be in, but I mean, I'm very optimistic long-term. I mean, we had 2 million people migrate into the company, and obviously that's, whether it was illegal or illegal, doesn't matter. You got 2 million people here that need to be housed.
Oh, you said in the company. I was like, what?
No, not in the company, in the country. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
And so I look at the demands on housing and I say, because of the demands on housing that we can visually see, that's why I'm optimistic about the real estate market going forward. We don't have enough housing units to provide adequately for those who are going to need them. And that's pressure that over the long term, I could see the housing market continue to strengthen over time. And that's the reason why, is because the demand's not going away.
Now, when a market shifts like it is now, this is usually that time where people are like, oh, I'm going to hold on to my cash because there's going to be foreclosures, there's going to be short sales. But that's probably not what's happening. That's probably not going to happen because of that whole inventory issue, right?
It's tough to know for sure what the shadow inventory really is. Last year we purchased some data that gave us some insight on what the moratorium market looked like in terms of, how many people were in some sort of a forbearance program. We researched that as heavily as we could to try to get a feel for it. I'm not going to quote numbers in this podcast because I'm not confident that everything was accurate.
Oh, okay.
What I will say is that it was a lot of people were there. However, like 6 months later, that number had diminished a lot because a lot of those people had transitioned away from the forbearance program. So they'd either refinanced their home or brought their mortgage current or they sold the property. And all three of those resolved the forbearance issue, right? So now you go into where we're at today, and I would say maybe about a third of who was experiencing that during COVID is probably what's still left to be what we consider to be distressed. And they're probably in a position where they have to make a decision. Do we sit in our homes longer or do we sell them if we have some equity? And so we're not quite there yet. I think it'll take probably another 6 months before we'll know for sure what that market looks like. I can tell you right now, we don't have a lot of foreclosures showing up. And we are seeing occasional short sales. But they're very occasional. And for most of them, those are people that have purchased over the last 24 months because anybody that's owned their home longer than that usually has plenty of equity to just sell the property if that's what they want to do.
And hopefully took advantage of refinancing in those high 2s, low 3s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're not going to see that. So what is it? We're seeing inventory climb but small amount. You just went from 2.75 to 2.9 in a month. So it's still not going crazy. We're going into a neutral market. Interest rates continue to rise. Is there any news coming out that's like, hey, over the next few months, this is what the Feds are going to do this, or nothing? Is it just cloudy?
I mean, they've been pretty clear, actually. I mean, right now with this most recent inflation report, I think it was like at 8.2 or 8.3. I think that gave the Federal Reserve, that's the entity that sets short-term interest rates. I feel like it gave them some runway to raise that rate. So, I'm no expert, but the experts that I'm listening to are saying that it's likely going to be a 0.75% increase in their next meeting, or when they make their next announcement for raising the rate. And that's what they're saying. And my personal opinion is it's probably anywhere between 0.5% and 0.75%. So I'm kind of agreeable that it's probably somewhere in there. That will translate into some upward pressure on the long-term mortgage rates, but they're not tied lockstep. You know what I mean? So just because the Fed raises the rate doesn't mean the mortgage rate goes up overnight just like that. The mortgage rates are set a lot more by the demand for mortgage-backed securities. And actually the biggest pressure, I think, on the mortgage market is that they think that long-term interest rates are going to be lower. And so they're kind of pricing into mortgages they're doing now.
That means they're going to want to buy the mortgages now at the 7%.
But they know that they're going to refinance out of them, though.
Oh.
You get what I'm saying? So like the mortgage companies recognize that, hey, you know what, I'm going to go give this loan to somebody at 7% today, but in 2 years, the rates are probably going to be 5%, right? I don't have a crystal ball, but if that's what they're thinking, then they're thinking, well, I'm only going to have this loan for a couple of years, so I've got to charge some points up front. You know what I mean? Or I have to charge a little bit of a higher rate. I got to get a little bit better return because the chances are they're going to refinance out of this loan over the next 24 months, right? And that's actually what's creating some of that challenge right now in the mortgage market. So, I'm pretty optimistic again about interest rates too. I think that it's highly likely that once we get inflation numbers to come down, I think you're going to see mortgage interest rates going down also. And I tell you right now, listeners, the moment that mortgage interest rates consistently go down, you're going to see buyer demand or affordability correct itself. Because like we talked about in the previous podcast, and I'm serious about this, we do not have a demand problem. We talk to buyers all the time that want to purchase. We have an affordability issue. And that affordability issue has been created by higher interest rates.
And there's, I'm very conflicted because I try not to listen to any news.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I'm able to pull some pieces of data in. And there's a few things that have popped up recently. Like I was reading how the British pound has never been lower against the dollar for like some long period of time.
Yeah.
And that the European Union and some other countries were applying pressure in the United States to say, hey, look, you need to stop raising interest rates because it has an effect on the dollar, because the dollar is basically still the currency of the world, right? Yeah. And so it didn't get too far in. It just said that there was pressure, like outside forces are trying to stop us from raising interest rates, right? And then on top of that, I was reading about how there's some proposals in California around trying to slow down I think it was the effects of that capital gains every 2 years, how which just kind of escalated people flipping homes.
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of forces at work trying to slow this down.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen from that.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I don't think the Fed's probably too concerned about what Europe's doing right now. I think Fed's probably pretty focused on just handling the inflation issues in the country. Mm-hmm. They probably have more of an egocentric opinion of if we can keep our inflation in check, they've already solved the problem for the rest of the world. And I don't mean that to be, egotistical or anything, but I do think the
Merca.
Fed, yeah, right.
Merca.
I think the Fed is more focused on controlling the U.S. issue.
Well, we also talked about how at some point supply chains are going to catch up.
Yeah.
And that's going to cause, inflation's going to come
What's
down.
happening now?
It is. And so then once you have inventory, then inflation's going to come back down.
Absolutely. No, we got inventory. Supply chains are being reestablished. I mean, I think for most intentional purposes, the shipping lines are now open. We're hearing now that, I'm reading this. I read this from Economist. There's a great article out there. I won't quote magazines or anything like that, but there's some good reporting out there right now that's suggesting that that shipping, for example, the demand has fallen. And so now they're not backed up as much as they were anymore. The bigger issues apparently currently are around the trailers of trucks, getting enough truck trailers available to move the stuff out of the ports is where the next issue is now. And it's kind of like a traffic jam. I mean, how many times have you guys driven down the freeway and then all of a sudden you've stopped and then you start moving again and you're like, well, what the heck? Why did everybody stop right here for? You know what I mean? It's just
the accordion effect.
The accordion effect,
when you have a
right?
big group,
right now, the accordion effect has moved all the way out now to trucks driving down the road, fortunately. That's where the choke point is, where all of us were hearing about the ports before being the issue, right? Mm-hmm. Really, the issue now is moved to the trucks and the trailers for those trucks. And so we're kind of working our way out of it. You could just see it one step at a time, resolving the supply chain issue. And like you said, it's going to bring down inflation long term.
So once they start to reduce those interest rates, housing prices are probably going to start climbing.
That's
again,
my opinion.
Very quickly too.
I am so bearish
because
on,
the demand's there.
Yeah. What's that?
Because the demand's there. So that demand is like an immediate pressure. Like the minute that the valve is released with interest rates going down, you're going to immediately feel like, okay, it's going to drive.
Yes.
People are going to go back to like, hey, I've got 6 offers for you.
And the people that are in the market right now, I mean, that have the option of purchasing right now, don't forget, and maybe you didn't know, but don't forget that 18 months ago, it didn't matter if you found an amazing home that you were excited about purchasing. You were one of probably 15 other people trying to buy it. So 14 people who wanted to buy it were excited, but they didn't get to buy it. Today you can shop, and today you can make decisions, and today you don't have to like be the one of 15 offers. But when rates start coming down, watch out, because you're right. It's going to be like a pressure cooker. All that pressure is going to get released.
About 18 months ago, my brother-in-law put in an all-cash offer for asking price the second day the property was listed.
Yeah.
They didn't even get countered.
No.
And I contacted the agent. And I said, and I won't throw him under the bus, but I said, hey, why didn't you counter? All cash, full price. And he's like, oh, well, I didn't think it would appraise. Which I thought to myself, that's why it's all cash, buddy. Did you not catch the first part of that? But it was just, he just took an offer for 10 grand more, and it was the beginning of it. The market just getting crazy, and people just getting multiple offers same day over, and it just became, a bidding war. That wasn't that long ago.
No, it's not. I mean, and I don't want to put roses over everything. I mean, we are definitely still in a market correction, and we've got months to go before we can resolve that. We'll likely be in a real recession, fully documented by the end of the year or beginning of next year for sure. And that's probably a good thing. Like those who don't like recession, it's no fun to lose a job. And that's the sucky part about recessions is that typically it reflects a bad job market, right?
But that's not what we have.
That's not what we have
at
right
all.
now. No, we just have a reduction in GDP, largely created because of the inflationary numbers that we're seeing. So I think that we're going to see, this recession come in. We're gonna have to cycle through that issue. Higher interest rates are definitely going to be a drag on the housing market. And then as we work through this and get to the other side of it, it's going to be pretty optimistic, right? But I mean, if you're selling in the next 12 months, today's probably your day. You know what I mean? And if you're buying right now, don't buy only plan to stay there for a year. Plan on staying there for 3-5 years. And if you do, you're going to be great. Like I said, you still have to make a decision today. Do I want to rent or do I want to own? Which
is part of that pressure, because as soon as those interest rates turn, all those renters that are paying $1,800 a month for a small, 3-2 or higher, you know what I mean? They're chomping at the bit.
Oh yeah,
because like you said, they're paying 100% interest.
Yep.
Right. They're paying someone else's mortgage. There was a TV show we were growing up. I don't know if it still exists, but it was I think it was called Point Counterpoint, where someone would make something. And I feel like I have to be negative to your positivity, right? But the problem is NASA was just able to deflect an asteroid, and so I was going to bring that in and be like, interest rates. We've got asteroids headed to Earth.
Well, I didn't even know why they thought that was a big deal. I mean, if you want to go back in history, I was alternating. Is that the word?
Depends on finish the sentence. I'll tell you.
Yeah, I was moving the course of an asteroid years ago on Atari because I was playing the game Asteroid. Remember, and you'd shoot it, and the asteroid would literally move its trajectory in another direction. So this NASA stuff, not even a big deal. I've been doing it since I was like 7 years old.
I was going to say, I think they brought in Activision just to help them with this one, which
yeah, it makes total sense to me.
Yeah, so I'm not negative about it either. I think a lot of people, like you said, I think when the market is so hot and it's been so easy to just to buy, hey, got you in at 2.9%. Hey, we listed your house today. We got 12 offers. It gets this weird kind of silly euphoric feeling, like you're in a casino and the dealer just keeps busting type stuff. And any type of correction, people are hypersensitive and they always want to go back to the worst market ever. And none of those variables are in play. We don't have the huge speculation. We don't have inventory. So the one headwind that we have is interest rates. And it's just trying to counter inflation. And I think that the factors that are pushing inflation are going to catch up. We are. I mean, and they printed a ton of money, man. That's another big one.
Yeah. I mean, these podcasts are not designed necessarily to get into those things, but it's not, that definitely creates a burden for our kids. The more debt that the country assumes is a larger liability for our kids to have to deal with, when they're our age, right? So,
our country has debt?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit?
Yeah,
just a
little bit. So, but I think the last thing to talk about, if we want to have a more sober-minded conversation, less optimistic, I would just say that, right now, as we're going through this transition, and I said it a minute ago, is that sellers, it's probably more important right now than ever before. Make sure that you are educated on the market before you make a decision on what you're going to do. There's agents that have been in the market for just a little bit of time, and there's some that have been there a long time. And in reality, though, that doesn't necessarily mean that one's more educated than the other. Make sure you're talking to an agent that is actually up to date on the market, understands what's happening currently today, is assessing their, that seller's unique situation and what they're trying to accomplish, and then making sure you design a plan that complements that. I mean, it's right now more than ever, you've got to slow down and really look at the big picture before you make a big decision like that. Because people are stuck. I mean, they're trying to figure out, is it a good idea to move? Is it a good idea to move up or move down? There's a lot of questions in the market right now. And I think it takes a lot more discussion up front before making a decision.
Yes. One of the things that I think when a hot market, anybody could have sold a house, because the second you put the sign out front, the neighbor's like, what, your house for sale? Like, people are flocking, and that's not. And so you need to make sure you find somebody that can say, hey, look, this is what we think your house is worth. Oh, well, yeah, but I wanted, or it's like, okay, then let's go with, because I've heard these conversations in here where they've said, hey, look, this is what your home's worth. Well, I was hoping to get this. Okay, if we go to market with this and we don't see certain signs, is that going to tell you, like, look, this was the price?
Right.
Because when someone works on commission, of course they want the highest. I was hoping to sell your house for $1 billion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the market, what determines price? The marketplace. Right. And so just having those kind of conversations and having people that can even have those conversations, realtors that can sit down and go, look, I can tell you why I came up with this number. I didn't pull it out of a hat.
That's right.
And these are all the variables. And it wasn't one well, your neighbor sold last year for $369. So I got to think $372, right? No, the more variables you take in, the more accurate your assessment's going to be.
100% agree. Yeah. And buyers right now are shopping active inventory, not homes that sold in the past. So a really healthy dose of reality is to look at what's active for sale also, and trying to determine, where you would position yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, being 10 being most likely that you'd be picked. How do you position yourself in that price point where you'd stand out as a value? Because not everybody's going to sell right now. We're about to move into that neutral market. So,
well, awesome, Josh. Right. Thank you. I think you were pretty optimistic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But we need some optimism, because, like you said, there's a lot of people that are being a little too Chicken Little right now. The sky is not falling.
Yeah. It's not ever really going to be as bad as everybody thinks it's going to be, and it's not going to be as rosy as everybody talks about either. Let's just be rational. It's somewhere in the middle, right?
Awesome.
So let's stay rational.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate you. Next month.
Right,
have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
If you're enjoying the All Things Real Estate podcast, please feel free to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.